And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. I have a terrific guest with me today. Love the book he wrote, Stan Zimmerman, The Girls, from Golden to Gilmore and Roseanne. Um, Thanks for joining us, Stan.
Thank you for having me.
This is a great book. It goes through some of the incredible shows that you've been behind as in terms of being a writer. And also, I asked you before we went on, how would you describe yourself? And Stan describes himself as
Uh-oh,
sexy, funny. Here we go. Stan says, I'm sexy, funny, smart, and creative. And Stan, you're all of that and then some. And you really are behind some of the greatest shows that so many of us grew up watching and continue to watch late at night. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. I mean, I did not create these shows. I was lucky enough to be a writer on staff for these shows and learned so much from them, from all of the actors, from the writers, the producers. You're lucky in a career to get on one good show, but to have landed on three, and not just three shows that were popular at the time, but they remain popular and they remain relevant still today. Even a show like Gilmore Girls, which has been off the air for quite some time. In 2023, the New York Times said it was the sixth most watched TV show of 2023. So there's a whole new
Wow.
generation of people coming to these shows. I've seen that a lot with Golden Girls. All of a sudden, all these young kids would come up to me and they knew all the lines that I can't remember, most of them.
I agree with all that. And I'll tell you, not that I was too young to watch Golden Girls because I wasn't. I was just busy with my career. But now I'm watching it. And I'll call my girlfriends and I'll say, ladies, this is what we have to do when we're older. We're getting our own place and
Right.
that's it. I mean, it's inspiring me at my age. And you're right. A lot of young girls are like, oh, these people, those women were so cool. And the way they delivered your lines was really just amazing. I'm in awe that you could write lines like this for these characters and create them in the way that they were able to deliver them. It made us feel like we know them because essentially, I guess you knew these women too, right?
Well,
Um,
we were there.
yeah,
Jim Berg and I were writers on season one. And the exciting
right.
thing about being there from the beginning is you get to start creating characters and runs and storylines for all of them. So when we started, all we had to go off of was the wonderful pilot written by the incredibly talented genius level Susan Harris. And
Right.
then as you get to know the actors on any show, you start talking to them and you start putting their own voice into them. Because when she wrote this, she had some people in mind. She actually literally wrote, I wanted a B. Arthur type, not thinking she'd actually get B. Arthur, because B. Arthur was done doing TV after Maude. And the story goes, supposedly Rue McClanahan, her friend from Maude, called her up and said, I think you need to read this pilot. It's so good. And I can't even imagine
Wow.
Golden Girls without B. Arthur. So then I remember in the writer's room us talking about how Betty White always had these long stories, and we said we should give the town where she's from a name. And we're going through
Oh.
phone books, and that's how we came up with St. Olaf. And now it's famous for St. Olaf, yes.
Oh, I just love it. Um, but throughout your life, especially as a kid, strong women were always the influence, right? So let's dial it back a little bit. What were you like as a kid? Where did you grow up? Were you the popular muscle kind of kid?
Oh,
Or,
yeah, there's muscles here. Uh, the exact opposite. I was a theater nerd. I was just a nerd before I found theater and found my
right,
tribe with theater. I was a very gawky kid. I felt really ugly. I was made fun of. I was bullied. I was even spit on. Um, and then I found theater at luckily a young age. My second grade teacher, who I just got reconnected because of the book and an article in the Detroit News. So I grew up
ah,
in a suburb of Detroit, and I hadn't talked to her since second grade. And this reporter tracked her down, and the reporter said, "What's her first name?" And I said, "Mrs." Because when we went to school,
oh,
we didn't know any first names, but it was Judy Golden. And I got to talk
wow.
to Judy Golden and thank her because I would invent plays in my basement with the kids in the neighborhood. And for some reason, I was so precocious. I came to school and said, "Can we do the plays for our class?" And she said yes, without seeing the
Ah,
play, trusting me. She brought all the other classes in to see it. And then she called my mother and she said, I think he needs to study theater. And there's this wonderful summer theater program called Cranbrook Summer Theater School. And I started going there at age 7. Even though I was under their age limit to start, they, are always looking for boys in theater. And that's when I just found my tribe, as I said. And I went from being unpopular, in 7th and 8th grade to suddenly being the most popular kid at camp. So it was
Wow.
hard as a young mind to unravel all that. Like, why do certain groups of people like me and other people seem to really hate me and pick on me? And so you grapple with that. And, to be honest, there were times where I didn't want to go to school the next day. And, I talk about that in my suicide awareness play right before I go, feeling that bad about myself. And, I was bullied in school, but we didn't have online bullying the way it is really rough for some kids. And we deal with that in my play.
Wow. That's a lot.
That's a lot
But
to unpack there, but you ask, so there you go. You better put your glasses on for this and look really serious. Yeah.
no, well, because I want to go with something that the advice your mom would always give you. Stanley, just get your foot in the door when she would talk about
That
work
was my
later on
grandma.
in your life. Oh, that
That
was
was
grandma. Okay.
that was my grandmother, and she would always say, "Just get your foot in the door." And this was after Golden Girls, and
Right, right.
we called her Mama. And I would say, "Mama, I think my foot is in the door. I'm trying to weasel the rest of my body in," which hopefully I did, into some rooms. It was so wonderful that she lived to be 101, and she really got to
Wow.
see me be successful on Golden Girls, and what a show to have, and eventually she moved into assisted living, and I remember going to visit her in Detroit, and she would, parade me around the dining room. This is my grandson who writes for Golden, probably not that Jewish of a voice, but he writes for Golden Girls, and of course they all loved that show at that time. But
Oh, I'm
everybody,
sure.
that show, from little kids to older people, like to have that large of a demo for a TV show is really unheard of. When you think of even shows like Friends, I wouldn't say a lot of older people got into it as much,
Yeah.
but with Golden Girls, people just of all ages found something to click into those characters.
You know what's interesting when you were talking about creating plays in your basement with the neighbors? Is that something kids are still doing? Because everybody's so busy, and I often wonder, what if you didn't create those plays in your basement? You needed it mentally, right? You needed a place to escape and do your thing where you knew this is where you belong. Maybe you didn't know it at the time, but you belonged in your basement doing the plays, right?
Yeah.
And look at what it unleashed in you. And then the teacher that you mentioned, your second grade teacher. What a difference a teacher makes, people. I mean,
I agree. Teachers and nurses, we should be paying them what we pay movie stars. But today kids can make little movies. I always wanted to get like a movie projector,
ah,
something to film, and we just didn't have the money for that. But now kids can use their phones and make little movies and TikToks or whatever, and be creative in that way. I hope kids are still creating theater in basements somewhere along the way, because we need theater to keep growing and surviving. And obviously during the pandemic, it shut down, and it was very frustrating because I had all these theater projects ready to
ah,
go. And the first couple months of the pandemic, I was like, I'm not stopping. I'm going to do online readings of plays once a month. I just had to keep going. I also wanted to help theaters out. So I would, get some wonderful actors like Wendy Malick from Hot in Cleveland, and we would do a play reading. And then the theaters would, have their subscribers be able to at least watch some theater from their homes, because we all didn't know how long we were going to be stuck there.
I loved watching the readings during COVID because I'm a big theater person before anything. Loved it in college. I also thought it would be fantastic to be an actor. Didn't work out for me either. In fact, but I loved theater, so I decided to, throughout my life, be someone who goes to the theater as opposed to someone who's acting in the theater. But let's talk about that about you. You wanted to be an actor. Didn't quite work out, right? Let's go back to that.
Well, in an odd way, and you get so old, you do have these full circle moments. So I am
Yeah, yeah,
back
yeah.
to acting now, uh,
Right.
not by choice, but in my suicide awareness play. I had not wanted to create a me narrator character, and I didn't even want to acknowledge that it was me, but everybody that went to reading said, just say it's you, say you're a writer, say you're a writer on Golden Girls, because I think from the perspective, a lot of people with that subject don't know how to deal with it. So it's really about what happens to a funny person when something really heavy and serious happens to them. And you feel, who am I to speak on this subject? But we all can. And unfortunately, there's many people that have had this subject come up in their lives, whether it's themselves or people that they love. And so that has gotten me back into acting. It's really emotionally difficult to do that play, but
I
I
bet.
would love to be doing it off Broadway, 7, 8 shows a week, because I've seen the effect it has. And to provoke a discussion on such a subject that there's so much shame around, it's so important. I've already had people write me and say, "You saved my son's life because I brought him to your play."
Wow.
And so it's so powerful that it's that's more important, the power I feel from it, rather than the draining of emotion.
Where does the play sit now?
uh it sits now where anybody that wants to do it. I just learned last night that a school is doing it in upstate New York.
Ah,
We just did a
wonderful.
version of it in the Valley, involved with NAMI, which is a mental health organization, and there's a producer that we hope that wants to take it to different high schools once a month, which would be great. Um, the TL spill is that I just signed a deal to make a film of it, where we would have big name actors read all the different suicide notes in the play.
Oh,
So it's kind of like vagina monologues or love letters, where the actors are on stage reading all the different suicide notes, like Kurt Cobain and war veterans and LGBTQ members and kids that were bullied. Real notes that I just found online. And then my story with a very close friend that died by suicide. You wanted to talk about comedy, though, so we
no,
got
no,
off a
because
little
look,
bit here.
we all know that some of your best comics or most well-known comics, some of your funniest people, they go through an awful lot because often the release is through comedy, and you know, so this is sort of talking about comedy and how you got there. But so you wanted, I do want to go back though to when you were younger. You wanted to be an actor. You went to NYU. In fact, you met your long-term writing partner there, and you're still collaborating to this day, Jim.
Yes, we just
Um,
did a Lifetime Christmas movie last Christmas. We wrote it right before the writer's strike, and it starred a few people you might know, like Donna Mills and Linda Gray and Morgan Fairchild and Nicolette Sheridan and Lonnie Anderson, just to name a few. Christopher Atkins was in it. It was just a divas Christmas. So we had all the divas in it.
Incredible. What a cast. And your entire life, you've been surrounded by a cast of characters. We're going to get into that. But after the whole acting thing sort of didn't quite work for you when you were younger, you then came to LA. You were hoping to be an actor in Los Angeles, and just stuff wasn't quite working out. And I sort of want you to talk about that and how it landed you in to the world of writing, would you?
Yes, well, it started in New York. I would go to auditions and I'd be so nervous, my face would literally shake. And
Mm.
I thought the casting directors would probably want to call a medic, but
Oh, no.
I was like, I don't think this is my profession. I was so young and not comfortable in myself. Um, and then at the same time, I was starting writing, and the writing kept opening doors. And it felt when I went to a meeting about writing, there was just more love and acceptance if you got called into a meeting. Whereas with
Right.
actors, when you all go into audition, and I teach acting classes now and audition workshops,
Mm.
you feel like you're going into a really hostile room. And I tell them from a writer's perspective, when you come in to read for me, I'm hoping you're my answer, that we can stop the auditions and cast you. So
Mm.
it's a whole different way of looking at it. But as a young person, I didn't know that, and so I just was very intimidated. And then the writing kept opening doors, and I believe you go towards open doors.
Right. So what was that first open door where you got that first taste of really? They're going to buy this? They want me to write? What was
Uh,
it?
the very first thing coming out to LA, we kept writing scripts, a lot of spec
Yeah.
scripts, different shows, and people were like, "This is good," or "This is okay," "This is funny," but it wasn't the one. And then we wrote a spec script for a new show about a bunch of people that hang out at a bar in Boston. And that show ended up being Cheers. And right at the beginning, and nobody had written a
Wow.
Cheers spec before because we saw a taping of it before it went on the air. And so we were one of the first Cheers spec scripts out there, and people it was just exploded. Suddenly, everybody wanted to take us to lunch. We got a bunch of offers to go on a TV show. I quit my movie theater job where I was an assistant manager at the Vista Movie Theater, which is now owned by Quentin Tarantino, who was an extra on Golden Girls. So there's that little connection, as I call myself the gay Kevin Bacon. I'm somehow, 6 degrees connected to a lot of people. Yeah, so that was very thrilling when I got to turn in the keys to that theater. And I remember because we got a staff
Wow.
job, and the manager said, "I know how things work in Hollywood. You hold them because you might not have your writing job that long." And I just said, "No, no, no, take them. I'm not coming back here. I don't know what I have to do." I was pretty nervy of me to say that, but I had just been dreaming about working in show business since I was 7, getting weekly variety subscription to my house in Detroit, studying the box office and the TV ratings and which plays were which theaters in New York. And I was pretty obsessed with the entertainment business. So I don't think the entertainment business had a choice to let me in. I was going to push my way in through that door one way or another.
I like how you said you studied the variety when it came down. That's kind of what it takes. A lot of people might want to be an actor, they might want to be a writer. You do have to study. This is about studying your craft, just the way, you got to go and study to be a surgeon. It really does work that way. Some people get lucky and some people don't, unfortunately. We know that. But you studied it. You were really a student of this from when you were in your basement, honestly.
I
And
took
then
it
as you're go
seriously,
ahead.
yes, yes. And it's funny, some people think that they can just, um, you know, just you can just write a script. Yes, you can, but if you study and you see if you want to write for television, watch TV shows in the genre that you write in. I think obviously knowledge is power. So why not come with the most power that you can have and know if you want to write a certain kind of play, read those plays, go see theater. It only makes you a stronger individual.
I like when you write about the author. I loved her when I was a little kid. I felt like she had my personality. I was just a little kid, and I'm thinking, but can I really be like her? Would people like me if I was ballsy like her? Not that I use that word as an 8-year-old, but you know what I mean. I wanted to be the author. She's the one that I related to, and she was on Maud because she
Wow.
had guts, and she would just tell people off. You know what I mean? And growing up, you're a girl, and you really can't tell people off. But I was Maud. I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
Um, and I loved her. So what was it like? I mean, you watched these people growing up. What was it like to be sitting in a room with her and the other ladies too? I know you became very friendly with Estelle. We'll talk about
Yes.
that too.
Well, B. Arthur scared me because she's
I'll
B.
bet.
Arthur. And,
Right.
you're like, oh my God, what if you say the wrong thing? She's going to bite your head off. But she really was kind of a little pussycat underneath it all. We
Yeah.
didn't know that at the beginning. We just thought, like, at one time we got stuck in an elevator with her, and I think I was just like sweating and shaking and just don't say anything because what if you say the wrong thing? And years later, we had heard that she did not love the idea when she walked into the room for the first table read when we were there. Like, who are these young kids? And we looked like probably 15 years old at the time.
I'll bet. I'll bet. Because you
And
still wait, you still look 15 years old. At
oh,
least on the
thank
camera
you.
you do.
I love you. And she was like, they can't write for us. And then she read the script and she was like, they're good to go. And she saw we produced, the staff of writers that were all pretty young, um, could write for these characters week after week.
Yeah. You were on the first season. You wrote for the first season, right? Um, that was at a time in Hollywood when people weren't really coming out as much. Is that correct?
They weren't coming out at all. Um,
Yeah.
we were told that you had to be in the closet on the show, and that if there were any functions involving the show, you had to bring a woman as your date. And people find that very hard to believe because it's such a progressive sitcom. But it was just a different time. And I think our representatives felt that if we were out and openly gay, that we might not be hired back again. And I think it could have been part of the reason why we were not hired back. You know, some view of the producers on the show, the non-writing producers, um, I'm not sure they were very comfortable with us there for whatever reason.
Hmm.
So
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. We don't know, right?
we
But
will never know. I
look
don't
what
think
it
they would
launched you
admit to it.
to.
Yes,
Of
that's the
course not.
important thing is to take that and learn from it and become a better person, not let it bring you down. It's very easy. You could get bitter in this business, but I just, it always just fascinates me still to this day. I'm just very curious as how things are done and all these really, really creative people out there and what they're doing. I mean, I just watched the first episode of that Ripley show. It was beautifully shot. I mean, every
Hmm.
camera angle is just gorgeous. Or some friends from college are directing and producing The Gilded Age on HBO Max. And it's just gorgeous. And they cast every Broadway star you've ever heard of in it. And so it's fun to see your friends do beautiful work. One of my writing students just made a beautiful indie movie that I'm just so proud of her.
Hmm. But let me go back for a minute, to Golden Girls, if you don't mind. Estelle, I love that she knew about your life, and I love that she supported you in your life. That's on a personal note. That's very important to me because I've had family members struggle throughout their entire lives, staying in the closet, getting married, having children, having an entire life when really they were just they were meant to do something else. And I know how difficult that is, and to have support from someone, especially back then, must have meant a great deal to you.
She was an early ally of the
Yeah.
LGBTQ plus community. I think just working off Broadway all those years, and then of
Right.
course starring as the mom in Torch Song Trilogy, that just made her, the queen. And I've been wanting to write a one-woman show about her and getting to talk to her sons and people that worked with her, and especially on Torch Song when AIDS started happening, she would
Mm.
bring her fellow castmates that would have to drop out of the show and go to a hospital. She would bring them chicken soup, thinking that would
Mm.
get them better. And we just didn't know
Wow.
um, how serious, and there was no drugs or medication, and really was a death sentence back then if you tested positive.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you had that support because you needed it then. You
It was
needed the
good to know
support of someone.
someone, yeah, somewhere on that show, she had our back and she was looking out for us. I wish I could ask her today, like, did you ever talk about it with Betty or B or like Rue? And now that I've gotten to know Rue's sister from the Golden Fans at Sea cruises that we've been on, uh, her sister Melinda comes on as a guest and talks about Rue. I would just be very
Oh.
curious as to know, did she know? What is her feelings? I know B. Arthur was a very strong ally as well, and she ended up buying a building in New York and turning it into a LGBTQ plus center.
Okay. Isn't that incredible?
Yes, and back
Isn't
then,
that incredible?
because back then during Golden Girls, it was hard to
Wow.
get any celebrities to be out there for benefits and raising money. And Estelle was one of the first that would, like, every night that she could, she would go to a benefit. Even when Liz Taylor got involved, that was a big deal. You
Yes, it
didn't have
was.
many men actors because they were afraid of the stigmatizing of their appearance. But Liz Taylor was out there and fighting, to raise money.
I mean, look, there's still so many actors and people in the business behind the scenes who continue to not want to talk about it. I guess I understand that. You even alluded to one in your book. I'll just leave it there. But
Okay.
right, and it's I'm glad we've come far enough. but we do still have much further to go. Along the coast, we're doing okay, right? Down south in Miami, I'm not saying the south, we're doing okay, but sort of in the middle, we have a long way to go. So that is something.
The fight continues. We do have some issues on the coast as far as the media and the media conglomerates and the networks being still afraid of LGBTQ plus content. Just
Right.
my experience with, we sold a pilot to Logo called Silver Foxes, which was kind of called A Gay
Yeah.
Men, Golden Girls. And when Logo didn't have the money to make it, no other network would even open the script to read it, because they said it's old characters and it's gay characters, and that just wasn't
Wow.
their demo. And for some reason, they, I think, still believe that only older gay people will watch the show. But I kept saying, but with Golden Girls, everybody watched it. And
Yeah.
so I think there is still some lessons to be learned and some
Yeah.
progress we need to make. I mean, and still we need to have just more voices, more women in writers' room, more people of color. We just need, that always needs to be expanding. So there, we can't just really sit back and say, oh, you know, that's settled. You know, we've had one or two shows on the air, you know, like Grace and Frankie. Like it's not enough. It's never
No.
enough
Well,
until
it's
we
funny.
have many of those shows, like we have crime shows or CSIs. I'm not going to stop.
Well, it's funny. I've been watching Palm Royale. I know it's not your show. And last night there was a scene with Ricky Martin, and the character was the Prince of Luxembourg, and they got it. They got it on. Let's put it that way. And it was you know, they didn't hold back. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm glad they did that. But I wonder what people are saying in the business, right? But I personally was like, go for this. This is great. We need to show these relationships out there. So I was happy to see it, and I was glad that they were bold enough to go there. And so, to your point, we do need more relationships of color, sexual orientations, and everything else. Is it better with streaming, by the way? Do you think it's a little easier to get that sort of stuff out there? No?
A little bit. I mean, we had a major
Oh,
streaming company named, I would say, Netflix, that would not do Silver Foxes because they said it wasn't
ah,
a broad enough audience. So that's why we did turn it into a play. We had a sold
right.
out world premiere in Dallas that the wonderful Michael Urie from Ugly Betty and Shrinking directed, and now we're looking for our next home. It's going to premiere in Ohio in September 6th. I'm going to go in for that, but we're hoping to get it to New York and then hopefully through the back way come back around and do it as a TV show.
I'll watch it.
Okay,
I'll
you
watch
better.
it. You got me. Okay, I want to talk. We know about Gilmore Girls. We'll get a little into that. Roseanne. I love the way you sort of describe Roseanne throughout the book. There's people like me who have read about Roseanne, and then there's people like me who have never really encountered anyone who worked with Roseanne. And what you had to say was really very telling. Um, but along the way, you accumulated an incredible number of experiences in the Hollywood community. Um, one that I mentioned off the air, hanging with Madonna, Sandra Bernhard. I love that you were hanging with Madonna in a bathroom, not quite as it sounds. Can you describe that for me
It
and what
was
it
a
was like?
club. It was
Yeah,
a club, like
Club Louie, Club Louie, Club Louie.
yeah. On Olympic, I think it was, or Pico.
Yeah, yeah.
And we'd all go there and dance and get crazy. And Sandra was there a lot, and we became friends. And we're working on a TV pilot that I was writing for her. And in walks Madonna. And at that point, she was
Oh,
dating Warren Beatty. I guess they were doing Dick Tracy. And so they ended up being there, and Warren Beatty would just sit in the corner and like, honey, you go dance. And she would all just join us on the dance floor, and we'd be dancing with Madonna. And then somehow I ended up in the women's bathroom with Sandra and Madonna. I don't know how or why. I'm glad it happened. And of course, I was trying to, you know, buddy up with with Madonna. You know, I'm from Detroit, and I was pulling everything I could. You know, you want her to be your best friend, and I so respected her music, and I had all of her early records, and but I'm actually in New York now, and I passed by 1 Christopher Street, which was the apartment that Sandra was staying in when she was doing her off-Broadway show, and I would meet her after the show and walk her home. And that one time, which I write about in the book, she says, "Come upstairs, I want to play a message on a phone machine." Back then, phone machines were only in your house. You couldn't get on your phone. And on the machine was Madonna calling Sandra and saying, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" And Sandra's like, "What do I do?" And I said, "I'm going home and you're calling her and you're gonna go out." And then they started this
Oh man.
super cool friendship. Yeah, so you never know. But Sandra is such a unique talent.
I loved her. I still love her. I think she also was gutsy and ballsy. I was really always gravitated to these women whether it was Maud or B, Madonna, Sandra. I just like people who were like, no, I don't like your rules. I'm playing by my own. I didn't quite have their nerve. I did a little bit, but I would look at them and think I got to be more like that because they just didn't care. Eventually, they just said, "Oh, the hell with it," and they did their own thing. I also love when you wrote about the time. Now let's go back to California with Madonna when we were talking about Sean Penn. He did Hurly Burly right at the Westwood
Yes,
Playhouse.
I was
I
there.
mean, like, yeah, what was that like? The history involved that you've been sort of you were kind of like Zelig, and that's a double entendre there because I believe you were an extra in Zelig,
I
right? That you
was an
said.
extra. I was an extra in Zelig, and people don't know it was a Woody Allen movie where he was in all these different time periods. So I found myself at a lot of parties and rooms and openings, just as I was continued to work in Hollywood, and I always, at every moment of it, took the time to stop and appreciate where I was. I never took it for granted. I knew I was lucky, but I also had that Midwestern knowledge that you had to study and work hard to
Yeah.
strive and keep moving ahead. You can't just rest on your laurels. I mean, as a young person, I thought you kind of land at a spot and you'll kind of rest.
Right.
I was like, oh no, there's no rest in here, if you want to keep moving in the business, and there's like in any business, but particularly in the entertainment business, every hit show ends.
Yeah.
And so you have to start over, and yes, you have a certain level of success, but you still have to prove yourself. And, there's, as you see in the book, there's many times where you hit show and then you're on unemployment.
Yeah.
And then how do you pick yourself up? How do you reinvent yourself? How do you find something exciting that you want to do? Um, how do you get motivated? The
How
lucky
do
thing.
you? How did
Well,
you? How
you
do
have a
you?
really talented, wonderful writing partner. And so we would push each other. When he was down, I would come on and vice versa. I mean, there were a couple times when we both were really down. One time we were just like, we could not catch a break. And I remember we drove to PCH and we
Uh-oh.
looking at the beautiful ocean, but on the other side, we were hoping for a rock slide to just come and like knock
Oh
us out.
no.
We're just like, we're done. We can't keep doing this anymore. And then all of a sudden we get a call from Lifetime. We read one of your scripts. We want to make it as a sitcom. And we're like, oh my God, we were saved again, once again.
Well, there
Uh,
was your rock. There was the rock that filmed from
yeah,
PCH, right?
yeah.
With
Well,
the
and the
phone
show
call.
ended up being Rita Rocks. So there you go. Hey, wait a
Yeah.
minute. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But keep going because it brings up a point when you're around all these people, Travolta, Renee Zellweger, Kidman, Tom Hanks, those blue eyes you described when you first met
And Fonda.
Jane Fonda. A lot of people who are not part of the show business at all think, it's all luck. It's this. It sort of isn't, right? You just have to be that student and you have to keep going. And then hopefully luck will come your way, right? A little bit of luck. Your script will land on the same place. But it's not because these people work hard, right? Is what I'm trying to say. Like, can you sort of shed a spotlight on people in the business who had the staying power all these years?
Um, yeah, I mean, there have been so many. Just, my idol Lily Tomlin, the fact that she's had the huge TV career and then she made movies and then now she does both and she comes back to Broadway and she does her one-woman show. Uh,
Yeah.
you see someone like her always curious about the world. And at one point, I did get to had dinner with her and Jane Wagner, her partner and her writing partner as well. And Jane said, "Oh, in our house, like we have all the TVs on, like a control room, and
Oh,
constant media before we had it all on our phones. Now we can just, TikTok our way through a day, which I absolutely love. If they ban TikTok, I don't know what I'm going to do.
mm,
But I get so much information. I'm always just taking in all this information and reading things and curious. And I think that's what keeps, you interested in the world because it is changing. It's, when they say, oh, go backwards. No, the earth goes this way. We can
yeah.
never turn it, you can't turn the world back. It's like, how do you take the knowledge from the past and go forward with it? And it is ever changing and will ever change.
What was your biggest influence? Clearly, grandma, your mom, the women in your life. And was there a male influence in your life? You talked about your dad in the book as well. Um, can you talk to us about that?
It's mostly the women, and
Yeah,
seeing my grandmother, my mother, and my sister being very strong, opinionated, vocal, smart, funny women, never held back what they thought. And so that was just like, wow, that's so cool, that they could say what they feel. And, as men were raised to kind of hold it back and not have emotions. And I found that very difficult because I knew
yeah,
I always led with my heart. And that's why I felt a little like my body was different because my heart
yeah,
felt, I can only describe it. It felt like I had a female heart,
yeah.
and maybe it's because men, we don't exercise that muscle. I don't know why, but or we're taught to squash it and not really feel it. But I saw the women around me lead with their heart, and I was like, that's where I want to be. That's where I want to live in that world. And I hope it permeates throughout everything I write, whether it's hysterical or something really serious, that you can feel my sensitivity for other people.
Let's go to 2021, a hard year. I believe that's the year your mom passed.
Hmm.
Talk to me about that because I know the year my mom passed and subsequently has been very, very, very difficult. And these people have had such a large impact on your life, albeit complicated. That's tough. What was it like for you?
I don't think you ever get over it. Uh,
No.
I I knew some grief. I obviously had a lot of friends die of AIDS, and I had some close friends. My friend Julie Saxey and Allie Willis pass. People that I thought were like forever friends. But there's nothing like losing a parent, and especially for a gay son to lose their mother and my biggest cheerleader. And
Yeah.
I felt in a lot of ways we were in the world together. We would
Yeah.
definitely lean on each other all the time. And when we would feel alone, we were both loners and we loved being alone, but then we loved coming together and just talking and talking things out. So although she had dementia and I saw the light dimming, I was not ready to let her go. And I'm
No.
still not. And I feel like you don't have to. Um,
No.
yes, I would love her to still be present and to be able to share in the joy of the book actually coming out. She knew I was writing it. Um,
Mm.
but there's nothing more when I see her, the pride in her eyes, and so that's, some days are better than others, and some days you just like, I mean, initially when the 13 days I write about it in the book, hospice were the worst 13 days of my life. Um, and I didn't really have all the knowledge of what that meant, or what she was going through. When someone's passing, you feel like you're starving them to death. And now I've learned through TikTok, a lot of hospice doulas are doing
Yeah.
videos, and they talk about the commonality of a lot of dying patients. And that's a natural part of living is dying, but also your body shutting down and not needing the food. But I kept thinking if we could just get her to eat, she could keep going. But it's the body naturally saying, I'm done. She always said she did not want to be living in a compromised way. She kept
Right.
saying, please just push me over a ledge when I get like too much of a mess. And I'm like, Mom, I can't do that. I would be arrested.
Yeah.
Um, I understand that, and I feel the same way. I want to go out with dignity. I want to be in a dignified way. And then sometimes I felt guilty, like hoping she's alive, even though through dementia you lose so much of your dignity. And I know she would not have wanted to live like that. I know that. We talked about it a lot. So, as difficult as it is to live in a world without her, I know she's where she needs to be, because of what illness she had. And I can't be that selfish, but I do talk to her all the time. And I may sound crazy, but I hear her talk back to me in her
Oh
funny,
yeah,
sarcastic way. I know, people that have, if you tune into that, you really can talk to your loved ones.
yeah. Is this possibly something you'll be writing about as a play? Because I think about grief, and I think it runs a spectrum for so many different people. Um, and I just feel like the way you've written about suicide and people who attempted and attempt, with suicide. What about writing about grief? A play about grief?
I have written a play about my mom is somehow in a lot of things, but a loosely based play about her and my housekeeper. I wrote a two-character play called Yes, Virginia. Um, and oddly, some people have said, "Oh, I think she's a ghost." I'm like, I didn't see it
Oh,
that way. Yes, but maybe at some point dealing with grief. I really am loving directing, and I don't know how much more writing I want to do, but
interesting.
I really am enjoying interpreting other people's words and working with actors, and that's been super cool. But, you know, I know writing is my bread and butter, and people keep urging me to keep doing it. And there is a lot of material out there, like a play about Estelle Getty and a few other things that I still feel like I need to say. So grief may be
Well,
one.
I mean, isn't it the creative process? You're a writer, you're a director, you do television, you do theater. That's the whole process. You go in and out of different genres, and that's what you do. Um,
But I also need to start stopping and enjoying life and finding that
mm,
balance. Right now, in the past couple of years, I've been saying yes and to things, so it keeps
mm.
me extremely busy, but I think it's important. And my mother always said, travel while you can. So I've been, for whatever reasons, bringing in these jobs that involving travel. I was
Oh,
entering writers in a 14th century castle last May. I'm going back in July, and so that's been such a beautiful, wonderful experience. And then doing my play around the country has been really wonderful to be able to travel with that, and that's been a dream to go into different communities and work with local actors.
mm.
Combining all of that together.
When you think of your television fame, is there anything that comes to mind that was a true standout? Something from Roseanne, something from the Gilmore Girls, the Golden Girls? Does something just stand out when you say, that's going on my tombstone? That sort of a thing.
Well, there have been a lot of quotes.
I know.
Um, one from Golden Girls was stopping me from living isn't going to stop me from dying.
Mm.
Um, um, the Brady Bunch, it would be funny if it was on my tombstone. It says, "Sure, Jan." I don't, maybe that's not appropriate for a tombstone. Um, yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to write one, huh? I don't know. Someone
I
will
don't
do it.
know. It's just the scope of work is so tremendous. And the scope of the different people and personalities you worked with is so tremendous. Roseanne, for example, and when you think back to that experience um, of working with her, would you say it was difficult working with her? I mean, I read the book, so I know your answer, but what would you say to people who haven't read it yet?
I think you can carry both things. It was extremely difficult. It was hard working with 21 other writers,
Yeah.
uh, all their personalities, and she was very mistrustful of all of the writing staff. But then on the other hand, I love what she was doing with the show. Having grown up watching Norman Lear shows, I loved that it tackled real issues, but in a real way. And that I liked Roseanne was had the point of view of a Midwestern family just struggling to get ahead. And you
Hmm.
don't see that a lot on television. And I love that it was more episodic and not like Golden Girls where it kind of started and ended the same. You know, the people were kind of the same. On Roseanne, they had deaths and got new jobs, and it was like real life. I love that. And it just had
And you
like
know
a
what
different,
else? Go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. And
And
it
you
had different vocabulary. It was like really funny, and then it could be really serious.
and trashy too. It really pissed me off sometimes, like the way they were eating, right? And because, right? I mean, they were big people, and I thought, but that's the way a lot of people are eating. You know, I would take a lot of these shows very seriously. I'd watch them, and they'd say, "Why do they have to eat that?" Well, why not? Because you're putting a spotlight on what's really happening around the world. Or you mentioned Norman Lear, and look at the way he wrote for his characters. I mean, the way
It
you
was
wrote for
all
each.
pre-Ozempic, though.
Yeah, that's true. I haven't gotten on that bandwagon yet. I'm
Oh my
this
God.
close.
I'm like circling my doctor's office. Please give it to me. And he says, I can't. And I said, no, I want to lose like 10 pounds.
You? No, 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 no. I for you, no. Just go walk around the block.
Okay. Oh,
Anything
yeah,
else?
that's easy.
Yeah, no, I know. Anything else you'd like to add? This is sort of we went a little bit all over the place about your childhood, about your mom and your grandmother, a little about your sister, about the people you've written for, your early childhood. Being gay and the difficulties that came with that, especially back in the day, and where you are now with directing and theater. What would you like to say to people out there who are a fan of, maybe not, they don't know you as well, but of your work?
Um, I would love to hear from you. People always
Ah,
preface when they find out what I do, like, I don't mean to bother you, but for a
right.
writer to hear that something meant something special is just, you don't get that. Actors, get noticed and people come up to them all the time and want to talk about a project. But for writer, we write it and it kind of like disappears. So that's why it's been so great that I've been able to go to like these conventions or the cruises and the different fan festivals like for Gilmore Girls and meet and become friends with a lot of these people that can tell me stories of, watching Gilmore Girls with their daughters or
Yeah.
watching Golden Girls with their grandmothers. And, especially for LGBTQ people, like they would have this divide with their grandmother, but they could sit on the couch and giggle and laugh with them. And that bonding experience through words that I wrote, um, it's humbling. It's just, it's really a special uh, part of my life. And I really appreciate it. And I love knowing about it.
Yeah. And again, what are you working on now? And what do you feel like will be next?
I'm working on the movie of Right Before I Go, and that's very important to me. I would like to get it off Broadway. I still
Yeah.
dream of doing directing something. I've done off Broadway, but I would love to direct a Broadway show, and just experiencing life and traveling a little bit more and seeing the world and having those experiences. And who knows what the next chapter will be. I mean, I'm keep looking, seeing what it is.
Yeah. And how great that you and Jim have collaborated all these decades and have such a close relationship as friends and partners. That's rare. And that says a lot about the two of you. So, I look forward to more from the two of you. I really do. I'm such a big fan of yours. This is such a terrific book, everybody. I really mean it. I'm going to leave it on my coffee table. I always have people coming and going in my house, and they're going to love it. The Girls, from Golden to Gilmore. And I love how in the back it's got, I'm
Well,
Roseanne.
read the
Oh,
bottom of it. Stories
yeah,
about
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you say it. Go ahead.
stories about all the wonderful women I've worked with, and then you turn it over.
And Roseanne.
Yes.
I love that. But you're right. Stories about all the wonderful women I've worked with and all the wonderful women, not that this part's in your title, that have influenced you in your life. So thanks so much for joining us. And thanks so much for writing our voices. And by the way, keep writing for older women. I find them to be
Okay.
incredibly interesting.
I
No, but
would.
they're so interesting. I guess I have to put myself in that category, right? Because we've lived life, and we have funny stories to tell. So I appreciate your sensitivity to that. So keep writing to us for
And
us.
you have your emotions on tap, so I love that because I have that too, and sometimes I get emotional, when talking about my mother or these experiences I've had doing my little book tour, and the people that pop up from my past that come there, and I feel the love, and it's a lot to take in, and it's okay to get emotional about it, or I think that's important to, that's, you have many different colors that you can experience and show, and I think it shows strength as well to be vulnerable.
Oh, I do too. Look, I'm an Italian kid out of New Jersey. Need I say more? So anyway, Stan Zimmerman, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to our friend Darlene Chan, who
Yes, I love
initially, I love Darlene. We're going to have lunch next week. I've known her for quite some time, and she's magnificent. So thanks, Darlene, for introducing us. I appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for joining our show. Please pick up the book, Stan Zimmerman, The Girls from Golden to Gilmore, stories about all the wonderful women I've worked with, and Roseanne. Terrific book. Follows Stan's career. And like he said, he likes to hear from y'all. So y'all, I'm not from the South, but anyway, he likes to hear from, right?
Suddenly,
Suddenly
you and Beyonce are going to be country western
oh
singers.
my gosh. So, but please reach out to Stan. He likes to hear, and I get it, right? You're a creative and you want to hear what people think about your work. So please reach out to Stan Zimmerman. He loves TikTok. And pick up the book. It's a terrific read. If you're going to be doing any signings, let us know, because we'll tell our audience. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for joining our show, Deborah Kobylt Live. You can find us YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Then we put it over on audio version. It's on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, just about anywhere you get your podcast. Just look up our name, Deborah Kobylt Live, and Stan Zimmerman, and you will find our interview. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and thanks for Stan for being so patient with our hour here. And look forward to seeing you soon. Bye bye.